So today on the Accounting for a Community podcast, we have managing partner Janice Pomerleau joining us. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Brittany. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
I'm very well.
That's great. So before I jump into your bio, Janice, I think it would be great to actually hear your story because it's such a unique story how you kind of started with the firm and worked your career here. Would you mind sharing that with us?
Sure, I don't mind at all. So I started as a co-op student from the Mohawk College accounting program quite a number of years ago. And I did one co-op term here, and then they hired me full-time, and I worked my way up through the organization to get my CPA designation, to become a partner, and then now managing partner.
That's excellent. So today we're going to speak to leadership and leadership for success for small to medium-sized businesses, and your experience in leadership because you are you're a CPA, but you're also a business owner and you're also a business leader organized within the firm, and so you have a lot of experience in this leadership role. So what is your definition of leadership and how is it formed and how has it transformed your role?
So, leadership has a very broad definition and can be defined differently by a lot of different people. I see it as the ability of either, one person or maybe even a group of people to be able to influence and guide people within the organization or the company towards a common goal.
Right.
I think my view definitely has changed since I became a leader. I used to think that, a leader needed to have certain specific skills to be really good or effective leader. But now I think that every organization does need those skills, but they also need a different style of leadership as the organization moves through a different evolution. Every organization has different stages. At different times, they might require a different style of leadership. Coming through the pandemic or recession requires a different style of leader than an organization that's in a high growth mode that maybe really needs some heavy strategy. So it can depend on where the organization is at any different time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what qualities do you admire in a leader?
There's so many qualities. I think you need a toolbox of different skills that you draw on as you come up against different situations. But I think trust is probably at the very top of the list. To be an effective leader, you really need people to trust you because they're not going to follow you if you don't have that trust. And building that trust does require different type of skills. I think integrity is probably near the top of that list. But communication and listening is very, very important. Listening to your people and they're the ones who actually know what is going on within the organization. And I think if you can listen to them and then be very clear with the communication that's going back, you can build that trust. I also think, the ability to make difficult decisions is very, very key. Not everybody can do that. It's very easy to make the decision that's, the popular decision or, the decisions that's the path of least resistance.
Yes.
Because that's easy, right? But making that decision that's more difficult has a long-term impact, and that long-term impact can oftentimes be really, really important. So being able to make those difficult decisions and following through with them, I think, is also a very critical skill to have.
Yes. No, I agree. I think that toolbox analogy, it's not just one skill or quality that a leader has.
No, you're right. And I think at different times in different situations, you have to draw on that toolbox to be able to be effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you have a number of different clients in different spaces. There's a lot of things moving right now. The environment is changing, Yep. Possible recession, interest rates hike. It's crazy. It's a crazy time. What would you say is the biggest challenge that leaders are facing today?
There are a lot. I think, some of the advice that I could give in terms of, what to do with all of the different changes is, get comfortable being uncomfortable. When there's a crisis, it's going to be uncomfortable and it's going to be challenging. On the other side of that, if you can make your way through it, it'll be much easier. lead from a place of being courageous and open to change, right? Fear can oftentimes make leaders tentative or not able to make change. I think fear definitely has a place to kind of keep you within some certain guardrails. But you can't let it dictate what your decisions are, for sure. You have to make those decisions not from a place of fear.
Yeah.
And I think what's also very important is you aren't going to get it 100% right.
That's
right?
good advice.
You have to be okay with that, and you got to be willing to admit it when you don't, and then be agile enough at that point to change the direction.
Yeah.
If it's not working.
Absolutely. No, that's good advice. I like the get comfortable being uncomfortable, because you're right, change can't happen if we're kind of staying in that consistent space. We need to kind of evolve and dip our toes into new things, but it doesn't feel good.
No, it doesn't feel good, and it's very, very easy to go down that path. I think you have to just get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, very good. So again, speaking to business owners and leading through a crisis, is there any examples or advice that you can give after kind of leading through the pandemic and now a recession? We've been through recessions before, and I think you've been a partner at that time too, so
Yep.
you have a little more experience going into it.
Yes.
So what advice would you give to business owners kind of entering this crisis periods?
I think you just have to take one day at a time, right?
Yeah.
Trying to look far enough ahead to be conscious of what might be coming, and in the back of your head plan for that, but at the same time really kind of deal with what's happening today within the organization. And it's that balance between the management and the leadership, and trying to find the balance between when's the right time to be looking long term and when's the right time to be really focusing on today. And I think when you're in a crisis like a pandemic, or they talk about the recession that's possibly coming, you probably need to be a little bit more focused on what's going on today, with a little bit of a lighter view more towards strategy and what's coming in the future.
Right, that's good advice. So how can organizations balance tactical versus strategic imperatives?
So your job as a leader really, I believe, is to direct and maneuver that strategic direction. Your team's job is really to focus on those tactical and operational matters. So make sure that you have the right people who are doing the right job, and they have a real clear execution plan on for those tactical and operational matters, so that they're handling that day to day. I think you as an owner, you as a leader and owner, also have to be aware enough to understand the balance kind of and the effort that's required at certain times. I think that at certain points in time, it's going to be you needing to direct them to spend a little bit more time on operational and tactical, and a little less on strategy.
Right.
And I think, again, in uneasy times, it's a little bit more on the tactical.
Right.
But I think even as a leader, I think even if your team is really focused on that tactical, you still have to have a vision towards that strategy, so that you're still moving towards that strategy a little more subtly and not as strongly, but just maybe at a little bit of a slower pace. But you always have to have a view to what's ahead and what you need to be focusing on down the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I like that, and I think you made a good point by saying it's kind of leaning on your team, right? It's like your job is kind of to provide, as a leader, to provide that vision and that direction, but you have a team in place to help take you to that place, so let them. Right?
Exactly. And a lot of times they know what needs to be done. That's why you hire them and put them in those roles.
Yes. Yeah, no, exactly. So how do you balance planning for the future and being present with your employees?
That is very challenging. I don't know that you ever get that one right. A lot of it comes down to time management, and managing your time in terms of strategy, using your calendar in ways that work best for you. I think you really have to find that balance yourself. Everybody is a little bit different. Yeah. I find it really difficult to switch, mentally between that long-term strategy thinking and the more tactical and being there for your team in those more operational type matters in a day. If you're flipping back and forth between them every hour, it tends to be, for me, very, very challenging. So I try things like, blocking chunks of time for specific things to try to stay on task on just strategy. It is a different side of the brain, I think, you're using when when you're looking at strategy. So you have to kind of set aside the time to do that.
Yeah.
I think it's also very important to empower your team, to handle that day and day. We talked about that a little bit already. Empower them to make those decisions on their own. They don't always have to come to you for every little decision. If you empower them, they will, make those decisions. You have to be willing to accept that, maybe they're going to make a mistake. Those do happen, but that's how people learn, right? I think it takes time to be able to develop that rapport with your team. But if you can get that balance where you've empowered them to make those decisions and be okay with maybe it's not exactly perfect, but you're still moving in the right direction towards that common goal. Right.
No, that's good advice. So what trends are you currently seeing in the small to medium enterprise space right now?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on, and I'm sure, a lot of people have heard all of the same things. You've got, the resource issues, the talent management, attracting and retaining talent. It's one thing to attract new talent. That's very, very challenging, but I think it's very important to figure out ways to retain who you do have, because it's so difficult to attract talent. Depending on the industry, there's obviously the supply chain shortages that are out there. Not in every industry, but obviously in some of those more industries that are bringing product in. Uncertainty in the economy. I mean, we just came through a pandemic where there was a ton of change. Now there's talk of a recession. I think, each business owner and leader's got to be thinking ahead to that. They're talking, early 2023. So you really need to think about, what is it that I need to be doing today to prepare for that?
Right.
So that you can, be prepared for when that comes or if that comes.
Right.
But I think, the biggest one that I've found is the pace of change, particularly with technology.
Yes.
The pandemic, and I know everybody's probably heard this, the pandemic forged us ahead quite quickly with respect to technology. But technology changes don't just change the technology themselves. They're all encompassing. It changes the way you service your clients, and clients don't necessarily like change, so you have to be prepared to handle that. I think it changes processes within an organization.
Right.
Anytime you go from something that's a little bit more people-oriented to something that's a bit more technology-based, you've got to change all your processes.
Yes.
So that has a huge impact on an organization, because you still want to be efficient. You don't want to be doing things more than once. And there's an investment required to train and educate your team on that technology change,
right.
So that they are being efficient with it.
Right, yes. And would you say your clients are adopting technology more rapidly, or is it still something that people shy away from?
I think in the small, the SME space,
Yeah.
I think there is still a reluctance to do that. Obviously, with technology, there's a dollar investment.
Right.
But I also think it's that change that comes. It's difficult to make those changes.
Yeah.
And I think that some have tried to make them, and then the fallout from that is quite a bit in terms of the process changes. So it's been a little slower than maybe what some of the larger organizations might have been able to adopt.
Yeah. Well, this has all been excellent information and insight, so I appreciate you sharing. Is there any other last piece of advice or considerations that you want to put out there for future leaders or existing leaders?
No, I not really. I mean, I think we talked a lot about a lot of different things. I think you have to be doing it to have fun as well.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that if you really love what you're doing, it translates, and it also motivates your team. So I think you have to approach it with the sense of enjoying it and having fun.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And I think to your point, like getting outside of your comfort zone, doing podcasts, doing things that you wouldn't necessarily want to do, but being okay that it might not be perfect, but it's giving you that experience and that opportunity to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your insights with us, Janice.
Thank you, Brittany.